Hey there and welcome back. In this video, we will talk about what content Albion Online has to offer to solo players. Now, since Albion is a sandbox MMORPG, there isn't a linear path to follow like other traditional MMORPGs. The lack of quests and linear progression can make you feel a bit overwhelmed. The great news is that there are many forms of content that you can partake in, from PvE to PvP, and content that involves both in a safe and non-safe way. I'll be going over 15 different types of content that you can partake in. They won't be in any order. I will go over each of them briefly so you can get familiar with the content. I do have other videos that go in depth on each, so you can always check them out on my channel for how they fare on making silver, combat fame, and which build to use. Now, before we get into the video, make sure to join the Discord community. If you are looking for a community to play with, ask questions, or win giveaways, we have players from the Americas, Asia, and upcoming EU server. I give away 30-day premium every 2 weeks and currently have a giveaway going for the EU server release for the Bronze Founder Pack. Now, without further ado, let's get into the video. The first 9 we'll go over are mainly PvE driven. However, you can encounter both safe and non-safe PvP in some of these. At number 1, I have Gathering. Gathering is one of the most important things you can do in Albion. If you intend to play Albion Online for a while, take the time to focus on leveling 2 or 3 different skills. This will provide you a lot of silver in the long run. I recommend focusing on gathering hide and maybe fiber. Hide is by far the moneymaker, so getting it to tier 8 should be your main focus. If you're starting up on the new EU server, I would recommend focusing on hide and stone, since stone will be valuable at the start of the server. A few quick tips with gathering: make sure to use pork pies to increase your gathering yield and carry weight. Make sure to pick the right mount, like an ox for safe zones and a stag or swamp dragon for non-safe zones. You also want to make sure that you use your gathering set once you reach tier 4. Now at number 2, I have transporting. There are a few different methods of transporting. You can take a higher risk and transport weapons to the black market in Carleon, or you can take a safer route, which is transporting different types of resources like hide or fiber. This is a great way to make money without having to risk anything. You can either gather the material yourself or work the market by setting buy orders in cities with the lowest prices and transporting these resources to other cities with high sell prices. The more that you invest, the more that you'll make out of it. This does take some research so you can really get the best deal. I recommend setting buy orders before you are done for the day. That way, when you log back in, you spend your time transporting your material to the other cities. This brings us to number 3, which is refining. Refining and crafting can make you a huge profit. You can calculate prices for different materials to see what it's worth raw or refined. Each city will give you a return bonus depending on the material. For example, Martlock will give you a refining bonus for hide. So you will always want to transport any hide to Martlock and refine it. Depending on the tier and pricing, you can also use your focus to increase the rate of return. This allows you to use less material when refining, providing you with more resources to refine. As you may have noticed, the first 3 go hand in hand with gathering, transporting, and refining. All great ways to make money in a safe, stress-free way. Now, number 4 is working on your island. You can build an island in the city, and you'll have the ability to hire different type of laborers that will go on missions as you fill journals for them. You can grow a farm and grow different types of crops and make consumables. You can even raise animals for slaughter or as mounts. It can get expensive to build your island, but it isn't always looked at as the best way to invest your silver. It will take a long time before you see a return of investment. With that being said, it's cool to have your own spot in the game where you can build shops, a farm, kennel, homes, and set storages. Now, number 5, you have the open world mob farming. This is a great way to make silver and combat fame, especially in the black zone. Tier 6 and tier 8 zones tend to be my favorite. You can make money from items dropping off mobs, plus the silver they drop, rare chests, and roaming Avalonian chests that at times carry millions of silver. When starting a new character, this is one of the main things I do to increase my combat fame and silver quickly. I like to head over to a tier 5 black zone area and AoE down mobs. With the druidic staff build I recommend, you can kill elite and boss mobs without much of an issue and rake in a large amount of combat fame. Now, since you'll be out in the black zone, you do want to be on high alert. If you fall asleep out there, you can easily get ganked and killed. Now, at number 6, you can take things even further with number 6, which is soloing in the roads. The roads are contested zones that have an abundance of resources, chests, and elite mobs. Every time I head out to the roads, I bring my skinning knife to take advantage of the rare mobs. I use my nature build to solo high level tier mobs and bosses that grant anywhere from 30,000 to millions of combat fame each. I always recommend using a cheap set you can afford to lose when in the black zone. The only investment I would make is in a swamp dragon. There are so many instances where I've been able to escape hordes of people because of my amount alone. The roads can be a bit more difficult, but the reward is worth the risk. Make sure that you have enough mastery and spec in your build to solo these elite mobs. Number 7 is solo dungeons. Running solo dungeons is by far one of my favorite things to do. I personally like buying tier 8 to 8.3 solo dungeon maps from the market and using them out in the black zone. They can be a really good source of silver if you get lucky enough with epic and legendary chests. You can also use a very cheap build which increases your risk reward ratio. If you don't have a lot of time and want to maximize your chance at making silver, you can run solo dungeons in both safe and non-safe zones. Now, from my experience, it's much better to run a non-safe solo dungeon. You can use your solo dungeon map from the black zone portal area from your city. This allows you to use the stealth potion at one of the exits. You'll then stealth to your dungeon and wait to make sure that nobody is around when you enter. I do recommend waiting the 90 seconds before clearing your solo dungeon. This will prevent you from any surprises like getting ganked, since the entrance on the outside disappears after 90 seconds. Now, number 8 is soloing group dungeons. Soloing group dungeons can get difficult if you don't use the correct set, and it's a pricey investment. I always recommend having about 1,600 item power when clearing tier 5 group dungeons. If you have a lot of mastery in this set, you can get away with purchasing a tier 6.3. If not, you'll need to invest up to a tier 8.3, which gets very expensive. Now, once you have your set, the great thing is that you won't risk losing it, since this will be done in a yellow zone, which is a safe zone. However, getting knocked down by mobs can get pricey, so make sure you master how the build works before you head in. I do have a video on my channel that breaks this build down for you. Now, the benefit of soloing group dungeons is that you don't have to share the mass amount of combat fame that goes around, and you can keep all the silver from the mobs and chests. I've gotten lucky and hit double legendary chests and made over 7 to 8 million silver from one group dungeon. Now, number 9 is soloing static dungeons for combat fame. Soloing tier 4 or tier 5 static dungeons is an amazing way to make combat fame and fame credits. The cool thing is that you can use the same gear that you used from your soloing group dungeons. It does take a bit of practice to round up all the mobs and AoE them down. If you misplay, you can find yourself with a large repair bill. A couple of tips are making sure that you flag up with your faction. You will receive faction points that can be used to purchase even more combat fame. The other tip is going at least 2 zones away from your main city, which will increase the combat fame that you receive by 5%. This won't be the best way to make silver, but if you need combat fame, this is the way to do it. Now, number 10 brings us to the PvP content that you can do in solo play. Not all PvP is lethal and won't cost you your set. If you're just getting into PvP and would like to learn different builds or matchups, you can get your feet wet with arenas. You can queue into arenas solo, but you will be matched with a group, which consists of one healer and the rest DPS. You will find yourself fighting to capture crystals, which decrease your enemy's points. I do recommend doing a bit of research into good arena builds to avoid being flamed by your teammates in the chat. But to be honest, everything will be blamed on the healer anyway. Now, if you are the healer, just know that it will always be your fault, even if it isn't. Now, number 11 is open world ganking. Full loot PvP is the best way to make silver in this game, but usually you'll need to be good at PvP or outgear everyone else, which can be very risky. I don't recommend investing in expensive PvP sets until you are familiar with the matchups. There is a difference in PvP in the open world and in instant areas. However, if you really want to go out there and take advantage of some open world PvP, I recommend a bear paws build. Since they do true damage and have a lot of burst, you can quickly kill mounts and your enemy. Do some research into how the ganking build works. As a tip, if you come from below your enemy, it will make it harder for them to react to your gank since the camera gets blocked by your player UI. Now, at number 12 is corrupted dungeons. Corrupted dungeons are a fun way to 1v1 in a controlled area. You won't have to worry about any additional people joining the fight. Since you're in an enclosed space with limited room, your approach does differ from an open world PvP. I would recommend doing research into which builds excel in corrupted dungeons. Also keep in mind that corrupted dungeons do limit your item power. This means that there's a soft cap after a certain amount of item power. Corrupted dungeons in yellow zones are not full loot, so if you lose your fight, you'll get knocked and kicked out. However, doing corrupted dungeons out of a red or black zone will send you into a full loot corrupted dungeon. I wouldn't recommend taking a tier 8 set when you will gain a similar benefit from using a tier 4.1 or 4.2 set. You risk losing a lot of silver. There is also a PvE aspect to corrupted dungeons, since you will clear mobs and fight bosses at the end of the chest. So once you kill your enemy, you can choose to complete the dungeon or move to the next dungeon. Number 13 is dungeon diving. Dungeon diving can be a great way to make a good amount of silver. The way it works is that you head over to the black zone portals, with your PvP build. You will use the invisibility potion at one of the exits, and then you'll ride around looking for solo dungeons. From my experience, solo dungeons closer to the portal are usually spawned from dungeon maps, which increases the chance that someone might be in there. When you first spot a solo dungeon, you want to check if there are enchanted butterflies flying around the entrance. If there is, that means nobody has gone in. Now, if there isn't, there's a high chance that someone has recently entered the dungeon. Make sure to always be on high alert because it's possible for a third or fourth party to enter as you're fighting, putting you at a disadvantage as they clean up your gank. Number 15 is the mists. The mists are filled with objectives, resources, and PvP. You can enter the mists from safe zones or non-safe zone areas. Unless you have tier 8.3 or 8.4 and a huge amount of mastery and spec, I wouldn't recommend taking a very expensive set into the mists. In hostile mists, you will easily be killed off since there isn't an item power cap. However, there is a cap on your mount's health, so a stag is good enough. While in the mist, you can come across chests with timers that are either broadcast to everyone in the zone or smaller coffers that you can only see when in range. There will also be 2 designated camps where your objective will be to kill mobs and meet a specific combat fame goal. Once you've reached the goal, you will gain access to chests at the camp. The mists have a great balance of resources with gathering material, mobs, and combat fame, as well as PvP. I would strongly recommend checking them out, even if it's in a safe zone mist. Now, number 15 is the Nightfall Abbey. The Nightfall Abbey can be found inside of a mist. You'll come across an entrance at random locations. This will take you into an instant zone. The design of the abbeys tend to be random, where you will go through rooms clearing mobs and coming across different buffs. There is a good chance of making silver from epic and higher tier chests. The main thing you want to worry about is that it continues to be a PvP area. Depending on the tier abbey you have entered, it will determine the maximum number of players allowed in that abbey. If you aren't looking to PvP much, make sure to go in with a cheap build that clears mobs quickly, and always be aware of your exit. Overall, the abbeys can be fun, provide both PvE and PvP content, and the possibility at making a good amount of silver. The main downside is turning a corner and seeing a tier 8.3 or 8.4 player closing the distance. I hope you enjoyed the video. The point of this video was to familiarize you with the type of content Albion Online has to offer for all solo players. Like I mentioned before, this is only 15 of them and there are a few more. Let me know what type of content your favorite is. Make sure to hit the like button, join the Discord community, and subscribe to the channel for more Albion Online content. As always, stay epic, stay legendary, and I'll see you in the next video.